εσένα μοιάζει. Έλα να αγκαλιαστούμε μόνο μαζί, ήλιος και βροχή θα μπορέσουμε μια δεύτερη ζωή.
Αχ, τριαντάφυλλα μου γελαστικά πάνω στα γλυκά σου αγκάθια, σαν πουλί είναι πιαστικά, που της μοίρας τα σημάδια εμοιραστικά. Χτυπά δυνατά, ξυπνά τη ζωή που χάσαμε, τα όνειρά μας που χαλάσαμε, να'ρθουν το πρωί. Χτυπά δυνατά, να τα ακού.
Πάμε.
Good evening and welcome to the Sparta Live webinar series, an online program of lively workshops themed around the history, archaeology and legacy of Sparta and Laconia, hosted jointly by the Center for Spartan and Peloponnesian Studies of the University of Nottingham and the city of Sparti, the site of ancient Sparta in Greece. I'm Chrysanthi Galou, Associate Professor of Archaeology and Director of the Center, and I'm joined by Professor Will Bowden, Head of the Classics and Archaeology Department here at Nottingham, who's also representing the Center for Late Antique and Byzantine Studies, as we're co-hosting today's event. I'm also joined by Dr. Matt Thompson, Teaching Associate in Ancient History and Secretary of the Center, who will be coordinating the Q&A session. So a warm welcome to our attendees on Teams and also those of our friends who are attending via the Vachos radio website. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Professor Bowden to introduce today's distinguished speaker. Will?
Thank you, Chrysanthi. Good evening, everybody. I'm Professor Will Bowden. I'm the head of department here at the University of Nottingham in the Department of Classics and Archaeology, and I'm also representing our Centre for Late Antique and Byzantine Studies. And it's a particular pleasure to combine the activities of these centres as a reminder, of course, that Spartan and Peloponnesian studies, covers much more than the classical period of Sparta's history, and so that's why it's a particular pleasure for me to welcome today's speaker. And Εύης Κατσάρα studied archaeology and history of art at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens and is currently an MPhil candidate in the management of monuments, archaeology, urban planning and architecture at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. She's twice been awarded a scholarship from the American School of Classical Studies at Athens to study Byzantine pottery at the Istanbul Archaeological Museums, and has also been awarded the Centenary Bursary Award by the British School at Athens for study and research at the Institute of Archaeology at Oxford in the United Kingdom. She's is a experienced participant in excavations, participating in projects in Paphos on Cyprus, on the island of Kos, and at a range of sites in Attica. Since 1997, she's been working at the Eforeit of Antiquities of Laconia, where she has conducted rescue excavations in several plots in the modern city. But her main foci of interest are Byzantine pottery and architecture, and she's published several papers on those subjects. And it's on one of those areas that she's going to be talking to us tonight. She'll be talking about Byzantine glazed tableware from Lacedaemon, the social, economic and historical contexts. So, Evie, the stage is yours. I shall pass over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I shall begin immediately. The glazed ceramics, the Byzantine glazed ceramics from the city of Sparta, called Lacedaemon or Lacedaemonia during the Byzantine period, came first to light during excavation carried out by the British School at Athens at the Acropolis during the early and the late 20th century. A large quantity of Byzantine ceramics has also been do you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes, okay, I continue. Has also been recovered during rescue excavation carried out on various sites in the modern city by the Eforeit of Prehistoric and Classical Antiquities and the Eforeit of Byzantine Antiquities over the last 15 years and even more systematically over the last 30 years. The archaeological research has provided important information about the location of the remains of the Byzantine Lacedaemon. Actually, at the northern part of the modern city, to the south of the fortified Acropolis, the Castron, I will call it the Castron from now on, where the blocks 127, 126, 125, and 134 are located. Excavations brought to light the remains of the whole district of Lacedaemon, constituted by a great concentration of public buildings, dwellings, churches, a cemetery, and a workshop installations. The pottery discussed today concerns Byzantine glazed tableware yielded during rescue excavations carried out at 4 urban plots and from the Castron. Therefore, 5 assemblages will be presented. The first one, recovered during excavation conducted by the BSA, by the British School at Athens between 1905 and 1909 at the scene and the orchestra of the ancient theatre at the Acropolis, where houses has been constructed in the Middle Byzantine period. The second, an assemblage at the eastern side, you can see at the image, of a Middle Byzantine church dated to the late 10th century, probably the Catholicon of a monastery, where a number of graves have been found, called from now on the Androuchos plot. Third, an assemblage from an olive press installation dated from the late 9th to the early 10th century, the Philippopoulos plot. Fourth, from a site with poor architecture, it's number 5, as you can see at the map, where a large quantity of Byzantine pottery was recovered at the Triantafylakos plot, a site located at the outskirts of the core of the extramuros Byzantine city, which demonstrate the extent of the city, and finally an assemblage from 2 pits where high-quality glazed tableware has been yielded at the Linardis plot, which is located far from the residential part of the extramuros city. A choice from more than 1,000 fragments representing approximately 400 different glazed vessels has been made. The ceramic material is representative of 3 main chronological horizons: the 10th, 11th century period, the 12th-13th century period, and in small proportions the 14th century. In this lecture, we will be focused on the 12th and early 13th glazed ceramics. The earlier identifiable glazedware is the important Constantinopolitan whiteware and polychrome ware, also found at a number of sites in the Eastern Mediterranean, such as Corinth, Chalkis, Thebes, Thessaloniki, Ierissos in Chalkidiki, Crete, at the islands of Samothraki, etc. In Lacedaemon, it occurs in small quantities and indicates connections with the capital of the empire during the 10th and 11th century. The Constantinopolitan whiteware is represented by body shirts of small bowls or cups with green overglazed and a fragment of the handle of a chafing dish with relief decoration and green glaze dated to the 10th and 11th century. The polychrome ware is also an indisputably Constantinopolitan product. It owns its uniqueness among the wide-bodied glazed wares in bearing elaborate painted motifs. Though important from a technical point of view and for its range of decorative patterns, polychrome ware is in fact quite small within the Byzantine pottery as a whole, though one with a very wide distribution. Most of them are fragmentary and they come from fields with high proportions of residual material. The Spartan example has been recovered at the Theatre of Sparta, where dwellings have been yielded during the excavations of the fields of the scene and the orchestra. It has a decoration of black and white patterns that are repetitive, dots of yellow color, and also blue color, which is a rarity. It can be identified by Talbot Rice's black and white class, Morgan's Group 3, and Hayes's class 3 dated to the 11th, early 20th century, whereas Guy Sanders, having re-examined the material, considers that there is evidence for a considerable earlier date. Natalia Poulou-Papadimitriou, in a recent study about polychrome ware, suggests that this specific group, usually found in residential sites in coastal cities, indicates the presence of individuals from Constantinople, most probably officials. She considers that polychrome ware were personal belongings of those Constantinopolitans and that their recovery in various sites is irrelevant to commercial activity. According to this, we could consider that the fragment of polychrome ware found in Lacedaemon in a residential area of the Castron belongs to the household of a Constantinopolitan, perhaps an official, who had lived in the site. An abundance of different decorative styles of the 20th century and in first half of the 13th century emerges in Spartan glazed tableware, red-bodied tableware. The red-bodied glazed ware is recovered in large quantities and it is represented by plain glazed ware of the 11th century, mostly fragments of chafing dishes or small bowls. Fine sgraffito of the middle of the 12th century, where spirals are the predominant motif, and wedding shoots in complex combinations and variations were organized within medallion on the bottom of the vessels and in bands around the walls. In free styles, they were rendering iconographic motifs with animals, fishes, or birds depicted freely in the field. Green and brown painted ware of the first half of the 12th century employs colored glazed green and brown motifs of spirals and a great variety of decorative designs of geometrical and floral motifs. Missals ware of the middle to the late 12th century are also represented in Sparta. Missals ware are decorated with geometric or floral motif, as well as iconographic scenes with a preference to animals. They are the only type of the 12th century that is definitely a local product. Guy Sanders has studied 3 pieces of Mizzle's ware from the excavations of the Roman Stoa held during the 19th by the British School at Athens, and he reports that the clay is local. He suggested that Mizzle's ware may be a Peloponnesian style and that they ought to be considered an import when found elsewhere, a suggestion confirmed by the archaeological data. The Mizzles ware recovered in Sparta have different fabric and various types, meaning different types of dots in terms of their size and their color, and a variety of overglazed color. Of quite an interest is a group that I consider to be locally produced, with yellow overglazed and pale greenish shadows on it, that they imitate metalware. The group I'm talking to you about is the group you see down to the right on your image. Incised graffito ware of the second half of the 12th century and early 13th century is decorated with spirals or floral decoration in the central medallion, while the type of this freestyle comprises iconographic subjects, animals such as birds and fishes, and human figures with a preference to the depiction of soldiers. You can see them. And the next, or these men holding a falcon. In Sparta also occurs the incised ware with rings mainly decorated with X's, which was a common trend in the 13th century, as well as the incised graffito ware with a checkered tondo filled with spirals that appear as an attenuated open figure 6, number 6, dated to the 3rd quarter of the 13th century, according to the study of Johanna Dimopoulos. Another decorative style is green and brown painted incised ware of the late 12th, early 13th century. In the decorative type of champlevé ware, the removal of the sleeve over part of the field to a limited extent occurs from the middle of the 12th century. It is the example above. The aim was to emphasize individual elements such as medallions surrounded by bands of intricate decoration. But in full extent, the type is developed from the late 12th and during the early decades of the 13th century. The repertoire of this group has a very large number of motifs involving human figures and animals. In the row downstairs, can we go back, please? You can see the rabbits. Rabbits is a very, very popular animal to be depicted in champlevé ware. We continue. Late sleeve painted ware is represented, and it's dated to the first half of the 13th century. Another great group represented in Sparta, and I'm only going to show you one small fragment, is the Zephypus ware. This group of pottery with dark red, fine, hard fabric, thin walls, meticulous decoration, and shiny glaze, which dates from the late 12th to the late 13th century, has been found in Constantinople, where they have also been produced, and in other cities, Cyprus, Corinth, Thessaloniki, Kherson in the Crimea, Acre, Pergamon, etc. The fragment I am presenting you and I'm going to talk to you about today, it comprises a decorative type where a metope consisted of vertical lines alternating with reverse S-shaped motifs. Such an example has been recovered at the residential, this example has been recovered at the residential area created above the scene and the orchestra of the theater, and it is definitely an import from an unknown source. The fragment belongs to a group called Zephypus ware, au sens strict, a term established by Yona Waxman and Véronique François in their study about Zepsipus ware and the result of a chemical analysis of samples from the sites mentioned above. The Zepsipus ware of Sanskrit are the group of samples distinguished by homogeneity and coherence of their fabric from the same but still unknown origin. The small Spartan fragment was classified as Group A by Yona Waxman and Véronique François, and the identification of its characteristics connected with Class 1A established by Megot dated to the late 12th century. I make a parenthesis to inform that after that, we had a large excavation at Sirkeci station in Istanbul, where a workshop of Zepsipus ware has been recovered, as well as Kusandashi in Asia Minor, where also workshops of Zepsipus ware has been recovered. The image you see, the fragment you see now, is a derivative Zepsipus ware. The possibility of local imitation of Zepsipus ware was first noted by Megot himself. In Sparta, there have been recovered examples of imitation from the Acropolis excavation by the British School at Athens, named derivative Zepsipus ware by Pamela Armstrong and dated to the 13th century. They are decorated at the bottom of the vessels with non-joined circles or long spirals. Their fabric is not the one of the original Zepsipus ware, and their glaze is not of good quality, which indicates that they are locally produced. Guy Sanders called this type of ware late sgraffito ware. The research at the Linardis plot yielded only few archaeological remains dating to the archaic Hellenistic period. Furthermore, there has been revealed 4 pits cut into the bedrock. In 2 pits, Byzantine glazed pottery of high quality has been recovered, consisted of a group of luxurious glazed tableware. First, we presented a fragment covered with white slip and ochre glaze with a depiction of a warrior with long hair and carefully drawn clothes. The fragment belongs to the flat bottom and the low ring base of a plate. In the warrior depiction, the potter / artist infilled the curls of the hair with darker glaze, whereas for the rest of the decoration, the prevailing color is the one of the overglaze on the surface of the plate. The fragment belongs to a group of ceramics with a darker infill, where a darker infill can be seen to overlay another lighter layer of glaze within the incision. So this rare type of decoration, which is a luxurious version of incised sgraffito ware, makes this fragment of a vessel unique. Amongst the imported Constantinopolitan ceramics, there are also red-bodied examples. I will present one of excellent craftsmanship. It is a plate of excellent execution with a depiction of a hunting scene. The plate features a shallow body, curved walls, and a ring base. Both interior and exterior exhibit a whitish slip and yellow glaze, and the interior has some champlouvé decoration. An eagle is depicted frontally. Its head turns towards the right, and its wings and legs widespread as in an emblem, its claws grasping a dove. Stylized vegetal motifs are densely arranged in the background. A foliate scroll with palmettes, half palmettes, and heart-shaped multi-lobed leaves. Vessels with champlevé decoration usually featured human and animal figures. Actually, animals, both real and fantastic, occupied an important place in Byzantine art and thought. Artists readily employed animal representation along with foliate design as part of their artistic vocabulary. Animals associated with the hunt were also common subject matter for Byzantine tableware. Hunting iconography was frequently related to dining at all periods in the Byzantine world. Moreover, the eagle was a symbol of imperial authority, and when it was depicted in hunting scene, it was interpreted as the power of the empire over the enemy forces. The plate belongs to a group distinguished by the dense arrangement of its decorative motifs. The posture and the rendering of the plumage of the eagle's body recall similar motifs in sculpture and embroidery. At the period of time the plate is dated late 12th and early 13th century, but especially during the whole 12th and first half of the 13th century, potters were inspired by decorations in other mediums, and they would also have been established repertoires of motifs as their models, reproducing current Byzantine decorative designs. The plate is a fine example of an utilitarian object that has been elevated to a work of art through its rich decoration and its careful execution. And next, we can see from the Leonardese assemblage two other fine examples of champlevé ware, this and this. We go on to the first ball. Two important balls from Chalkis will be presented now. The first ball has incised decoration and a decorative motif similar to those of the Cavagliani shipwreck, whose cargo has its provenance from Chalkis. The decoration of the ball is a depiction of an abstract arm that holds a spear with a kind of banner attached to it. The rest of the ball is covered with a synthesis of stylized floral motifs. The ball can be classified to the second group established for the Cavagliani shipwreck pottery with the same decoration. The second ball has also incised decoration with a depiction of a fish facing to the right and surrounded, by stylized floral motifs in rotating movement. Despite the difference of the facing of the fish to the right and not to the left, I consider that the vessel belonged to the group 1 of the Cavagliani shipwreck, with incised decoration of a left-facing fish set in free background and surrounded by floral sprays or spikes in a rotating movement. The Cavagliani shipwreck has been dated in the second half of the 12th century and is essentially adjacent to the port of Chalkis, which was Thebes' door to the Aegean Sea. A parallel study based on chemical analysis of pottery from Chalkis and Thebes has demonstrated that despite Thebes' primary position, Chalkis was, after all, the manufacture center of Middle Byzantine pottery of the area from the early 12th until possibly the early 14th century, and a provider of it around the Mediterranean and beyond. Taking into account that Chalkis was the principal manufacturing workshop, the cargo of the Cavagliani shipwreck has been related to the workshops of Chalkis. This is why these fragments you can see now and the two vessels above are imported from Chalkis. Now we're going to talk very briefly about the shapes, very briefly. The shapes that predominate Spartan's glazed pottery are medium or large-sized bowls and fewer dishes. Tablewares, such as the 10th century chafing dishes, are usually convex wall, adding to thickened ring, molded to take a lead. Fine sgraffito-ware varies mainly from either shallow bowl with flaring, slightly convex wall to deep dish with vertical rim and low ring base. Late slip painted ware of the 13th century occurs both as a carinated bowl with vertical everted rim and as a deep bowl with flaring convex wall, while the 12th century green and brown painted ware decorated with green and brown colored glazed motif of spirals is represented by a fragment of a deep, medium-sized bowl. The group of incised sgraffito ware, I have two pictures, the profiles and the bases, is represented by medium-sized to large bowls. The vessels have mostly convex walls, including examples of bowls with flaring to carvination. The type has mostly flaring ring bases. Green and brown painted sgraffito ware of the middle 13th century are represented by bowls, one which flaring convex wall and another almost entirely preserved medium-sized bowl with convex wall curving up with carvination to an inverted vertical ring, which had handles. You can see in the drawings the beginning of the handle. The measles ware are represented by several types of bowls, mostly those with convex or flaring convex wall, with a variety of rims. The quantity ratio of the diverse types of glazed pottery from Sparta demonstrates the predominance of incised sgraffito ware, followed by the measles ware and the champlevé ware. I'm only mentioning the main three types. Trying to trace the complex history of Lacedaemon, the following can be said. The geographical position of Laconia at the southeastern side of the Peloponnese was the cause of its own particular fate throughout the Byzantine era in comparison to the western Peloponnese. Laconia was located on the edge, the southeast edge of the Byzantine Empire, and the resulting of this location played a pivotal role to its relation to the outside world, both to the east and the west. These had been the major factors that had greatly influenced the material culture of its capital, Lacedaemon, during Byzantine times. From the 11th to the 12th century, Lacedaemon, the capital of Laconia, was an urban center and a prosperous city, defined by its large size, its dense population, its monumental building, its episcopal scene, and its circuit wall, the Castron, around which the city was expanded. It was close to productive agricultural zones in the countryside and in proximity to ports facility, Scala and Monemvasia. It was connected by a road system with other regions of the Peloponnese, but the preference in coastal routes should be considered obvious. From the point of view of administration, the city is less documented, and its role in the Byzantine administration system is little known. The text of the Emperor Constantine Porphyrogenitos De Thematicus of the middle of the 10th century mentions that in Peloponnese existed 40 cities, among which only 5 were official, the word official in brackets, naming Corinth, Patras, Sicyon, Argos, and Lacedaemon. In what concerned the administration, by the 7th century, the Peloponnese was part of the theme of Hellas. At about 800, the Peloponnese became a separate theme, with Corinth as the capital and the seat of the Stratiwos. An official, the Tourmarchis Desparaliou means of the shore, with a fleet of 4 Helandia was a type of ship, is attested in the 10th century. From the late 10th century on, the thematic administration was often combined with that of Hellas. The Strativos resided possibly in Athens in the 9th century, in Thebes in the first half of the 10th century, and in Larissa in the second half of the 10th century. Hellas remained an independent theme adjacent to Peloponnese, and its strategy are attested until the last decades of the 11th century, when it was divided to smaller administration. In this administrative environment, historical sources do not mention the existence of any official or of a military force in Lacedæmon. 2 lead seals, though, recovered in the olive workshop installation mentioned above at the Philippopolis plot, provided the first evidence of an official and of a commander of a garrison in Lacedæmon within the administrative distribution of the theme of Hellas and Peloponnese. The first belonged to an official of the mid to late 11th century, Petros Servilias, the Starches and judge of the vellum of the Peloponnese and Hellas, and the other to a Tourmarches of the 10th and 11th century, Ioannis, Imperial Protospatharios and Tourmarches of Spartaron, the commander of a tourma, a military force, most probably located in Lacedæmon. The official attested in the lead seals belonged to the regular thematic administrations. The Starches was a senior court title used from the late 10th to the early 11th century. He was the master of the Veste, a group of high court dignitaries, a title awarded to prominent generals. The Vestarches was awarded to senior officials and to some judicial officials of Constantinople. Petros Servilias was Vestarches and judge of the vellum of the Peloponnese and Hellas, so we cannot be certain if his base was Lacedæmon. On the other hand, the title of the Imperial Protospatharios was one of the highest court dignitaries awarded to senior generals and provincial governors. There were high-ranking theme commanders, and it is most possible that Ioannis, commander of the Protospatharios and commander of the Tourma, lived in Lacedæmon as a high-rank official assigned by the central government in Constantinople. Ecclesiastically, the early history of the bishopric of Lacedæmon is puzzling. The first known bishop, Osios, is attested in 458 AD. Then in 681, when the city was supposedly abandoned, a bishop of the polis of Lacedæmonii is mentioned. In the Notitia, the bishopric of Lacedæmon in the Peloponnese appears at circa 800, when it became the suffragan first in order of the city of Patras. In 1083, the see of Lacedæmon was promoted to the status of metropolis. According to the Chronicle of Molevasia, in the late 6th century, due to the descent of the Avars and the Slavs, the inhabitants found refuge in Sicily, while during the 7th and the 8th century, the invaders were settled in the mountains and seems to have kept the region a wasteland by their periodic raids. The Emperor Nicephorus I, in 802, took back control of the area. He rebuilt the polis of Lacedæmon, and he had a mixed population, the Sarkisi, the Armenians, and the Kafidi settled in the city. A few years later followed the installation of some Slavs and a lot of Jewish people who by the 9th century they had formed a considerable Jewish community in Lacedemon. The historical source of Lacedemon and Laconia is also known by two important written sources, the historical course of Lacedemon and Laconia, but two important sources, the Vita and the Testament of Phocios Nikon Metanoite, who became the patron saint of the city after his death in 998. The texts provide evidence of an upper class, the Archodes, and for an industrial activity within the good walls, the Castro. The inhabitants, as mentioned above, were of mixed ethnic origins. The presence of the Jewish population was closely associated with the secondary sector, the industrial activity, where they were occupied as skilled workers of dyeing the silk clothes. The arrival of the aristocrat priest Nikon to Lacedemon, circa 970, will create a number of changes for its future, since fear and insecurity were dominant even within the Castro. Nikon made a written deal with the Archodes and the rest of the people for the expulsion of the Jews from the fortified city because of their unhealthful activities, namely dyeing, tanning, and slaughtering. Nikon had decided, and he finally had managed to take under control the marketplace, the growing production and commercial commercial center at the heart of the city, where all the workshops of clothes, the bakeries, the greengrocers, taverns, etc. were located. Though he had created of Lacedemon a city of social, political, ecclesiastical, and religious cohesion concentrated around the monastery he had established, dedicated to the Christ Savior, the Virgin Mary, and Saint Kyriaki. The 11th, 12th, and early 13th centuries emerged as a period of stability and prosperity for Lacedemon. In the middle of the 12th century, the Arab scholar and geographer Mohammed al-Idrisi mentions that in Peloponnese existed 150 cities, naming only 13th to 16th as important and wealthy cities, amongst them Lacedemon and Monemvasia. Actually, the development of Lacedemon in the Middle Byzantine period has been based in agricultural production and in commercial activity concerning products such as olive oil, wine, products of pastoral activity, silk cloths, all carried out by local aristocracy of big landowners and a dynamic upper class. Besides the agricultural activities, the Jewish community had played an active role in the economic life of the city. According to the Vita and the Testament of Saint Nikon, the commercial activities in Lacedemon concern products such as olive oils, olives, wine, and fruits, especially apples, taken from the monastery for the Stratigos and the Krites. Moreover, it is attested by contracts that Venetian merchants were initiators from large-scale commercial exports of olive oil from Lacedemon in the 13th century. The presence in Lacedemon of Venetian merchants of olive oil has been known by a selection of contracts of trade. There were practically agents who lived in the city. According to state archives in Venice, they were two traders from Aquilium on the outskirts, a city on the outskirts of Venice, living in Lacedemon, acting on behalf of Venetian merchants who wanted to sell Laconian olive oil to Constantinople. Following the Latin conquest of Constantinople in 1204, the French nun Geoffrey of Villard-Douai conquered Lacedemon, founded a new feudal state, the principality of the Morea, of which he became the prince, and built the castle of Mistras, its center. It is known that Laconia, as a territorial boundary, has shifted at a certain chronological point from the Franks to Byzantines and vice versa. Little is known from the archaeological data about the condition of this shift from the side of the conquerors. The battles must have happened at the fortified Acropolis, and the extramuros residential areas should have been deserted, the population being alert. Indeed, if Lacedemon, a Byzantine territory, was a locality ruled by the Franks in a certain period, namely during the first half of the 13th century, the details of the aftermath of the habitation of Mistras are still unknown. A working hypothesis is that Lacedemon remained the urban center until warfare during the first half of the 13th century caused the inhabitants to flee, beginning in 1263, to the greater safety of Mistras, the future capital of the Byzantine despotate of the Moreas. The archaeological data, though, demonstrate that life within the castro continued until the 14th century. Glazed pottery from the middle to the second half of the 13th century onwards provides some direct evidence regarding the fate of the city after the end of the Frankish conquest, and the assumption of its complete abandonment, at least from the castron, weakens. The coexistence with Mistras until the middle of the 14th century is strongly supported by ceramics evidence and written sources. The large amount of glazed pottery that I study cannot be presented in full. This introduction of some highlights, though, has its importance. The glazed pottery presented today demonstrate an obvious predominance of imports or over local products during the 12th century. Furthermore, apart from Constantinopolitan whiteware, much of the dominant decorative types of the incised sgraffito ware and the champlevert ware of the mid-late 12th century were imported from not very distant centers of the Byzantine Empire, for example, from Chalkis. It is worth to draw attention on the very small percentages of the imports from Constantinople, which indicates that they should not only be related to high officials from the capital living in Lacedemon, but also to the local elite, the archontes, as well as an emerging middle class of the city, constituting a clientele of high standards who had the means to purchase important glazed well. On the other hand, considering that Laconia lies on the naval routes of the Aegean, it would have been reasonable to assume that glazed ceramics from cities administratively involved with Lacedemon would be imported to the capital of Laconia and subsequently recovered during archaeological research. Lacedemon traced its own course throughout the Byzantine period, depending either from Corinth or Thebes, having their impact on its material culture. The fact that it has been a wealthy and prosperous city is reflected by the abundance of good quality glazed tableware dating from the 12th to the early 13th century. Yet, the identification of the provenance of some of these vessels does not exclude Lacedemon from the rule. It is quite unlikely that it has been an exception to the phenomenon of the decentralization of the ceramic production and the mass production that took place during the 13th century. It is certain that Lacedemon should be included into the cities where regional production had served the urban and rural demands, a fact verified by some of its ceramic material of that period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Evie, for this very informative and very interesting talk. Would you be happy to receive questions?
Yes, I'd love to.
So our attendees can put their questions either in the chat or raise their hands and we can give you access. Will, do you have a question?
Hang on. Yes, yeah, thank you very much for that. That was really informative, and an amazing collection of material. Do you have a sense that it's such a rich assemblage of tableware? Is that confined to the one spot, confined to Lacedæmon, or is it, or was that sort of material penetrating out into the further into the rural landscape as well?
We find glazed tableware outside Lacedæmon, to rural settlements, if I understood well your question.
Yeah.
From surveys or as we do at the Eforate, we realize there is an expansion and a use of glazed tableware beyond the city, the capital, at rural settlements. And these, I think, it's not my thought, Pamela Armstrong wrote a lot about it. It has been the 12th century period of prosperity due to the commerce, the intense commerce. Laconia was a land of a gold, let's say, the olive oil, which was very much wanted in Constantinople, mostly, the big city. And the producers, even small landowners, had the opportunity by selling their olive oil to buy glazed ware also. So we do have sites outside the capital, several sites, a lot of sites where we find glazed tableware, a lot of glazed tableware. They're everywhere. In the middle of nowhere, we could see fragments of glazed tableware. And they were not cheap because their production, we have 2 firings and all these procedures. We cannot say how much they costed, but it's not a cheap item to buy by that time. So we have a lot of prosperity. The social hierarchy gives the opportunity even to peasants to have into their household some pieces of glazed tableware.
Thank you. That says, there's some, really interesting things coming out about sort of dining habits.
I mean, I'm working now a material from Agios Vasilios, the Mycenaean settlement found at Agios Vasilios, where there was also a small Byzantine settlement. It's full of glazed ware from the 12th and the late Byzantine period. And we don't have a lot of information, and I can't say yet the type of settlement. It was not a village. It was very small, but they were living there. We have cooking pots. So they were living there. It was a small settlement, very small for the countryside around it. But it's old decorative types of glazed pottery there. Just to give an example.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I can see there's all sorts of questions coming into the chat. So I shall hand back to Chrysanthi. But thank you for a wonderful lecture.
You're welcome.
So yes, Matt will be asking the questions from the chat. I will keep my questions for the end if we have time, because we have some very interesting questions arising, and post it in the chat. So Matt?
Yes, thank you very much. And I will also skip over any of my questions to go to the chat. So first of all, this is a bit of a two-parter, so I think I'll ask it in two halves. Can you say something more about the relationship of ceramics from Sparta and Corinth, thinking specifically about the measles ware?
Measles ware. I don't recall saying something about the Corinthian measles ware. What I said about measles ware, and I mentioned Guy Sanders, a great ceramologist, is that measles ware are produced in Sparta, and this is certain. And I didn't have the possibility with the cursor to show the specific one. I have located a type of measles ware which are very, very popular, and they exist in large quantities here when I study pottery, that I think that these are, and the clay, of course, that these are the local ones. There are several different types of local, of measles ware, and I look, when I study them, I don't know if I'm correct, but this is what I do. I look the dots, the color of the dots, and besides the fabric and all that, that makes a difference, and the overglazed. Animation, this type has a yellow glaze and some green shadows. They're mixed together, greenish, pale greenish shadows. And I think this is the Spartan measles ware. From my point of view, we don't have a lot of Corinthian imports in Sparta. But what was the question exactly?
The question exactly, I think you've answered it there. Was, can you say something more about the relationship of ceramics from Sparta and Corinth?
We don't have a lot of Corinthian imports, which is impressive. And in what concerns the fabric, after this publication about the Cavagliani shipwreck and the Chalkis thing, I think we have a lot of, I used to say I have a lot of similar things with thieves, but it is Chalkis. And the only interpretation I can give is that being a capital of the theme of the Hellas and Peloponnese, and the whole story of the theme, whether it was Hellas and Peloponnese or just Hellas, is so complicated. But it was the seat of the Strategos, so it was a big center. The fundings were going there. So it's a coastal city, Chalkis, and we had all the eastern coast of Laconia. So we have a lot of examples from Chalkis.
Hey, brilliant, thank you. And while we're on the subject of geography, have these ceramics from Sparta been found at other sites throughout Laconia, not just maybe the countryside, but places like Garaki or the Amakleion or Githion, places like that?
I've never seen that material, I'm afraid to say. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So the next question then, someone was wondering if there are any plans to conduct large-scale chemical or isotope analyses of, as in any Byzantine glazes, from various production phases, so to see if we can better define production centers.
Well, I am about to have a project of chemical analysis of the pottery with Jono Waxman. we had those 2 terrible years with COVID, and it was very difficult to move. I mean, I couldn't even go to Athens. So within the next 2 years, I will have the chemical analysis project of the Spartan material. This is why I work very intensively, macroscopically, to classify the fabrics. And yes, it's going to be a chemical analysis project of the Spartan material with, I can say the name, Jona Waxman. She's a prestigious scholar in archaeometry, a Byzantinologist. Yes, it's going to be within the next 2 years, a project about that.
Brilliant. That's a very exciting thing to look forward to. And so moving on to the next one. Have you found any imports from Egypt or Syria in the 12th century? And pointing out that some were found in the early BSA excavations, ?
12th century Syrian glazed ware, no. But we have a lot of imported amphoras, which is another big subject because the bulk of the pottery is unglazed courseware. So we have a lot of imported amphoras from Palestine and from places like that. But this is another topic.
Okay, if there are any more questions, please do put them in the chat. But otherwise, I think we might be out. So I'll hand over to Chrysanthi, who I'm sure has questions.
Yes, going back to the question that Professor Julian Henderson, our expert in glasses and glaze materials, have you identified any local sources of clay?
We know that a source was at the hill where a hotel was. But that's our only knowledge of it. And if I would ever do something with petrology, I would look at there. But no, we haven't really found anything else about the fabric.
Yeah,
that's the only place. But working at the Eforea of the Eforate, I have the luxury to see material from other periods, from the Roman period, Roman ceramics. You know, the strata is disturbed, so I can see the changes of the color because this is the change of technology. Technology in working the material and technology in producing the ceramics. But the source, the only source we are certain about is there within the modern city.
Good, thank you. And I'm not sure if we have any other questions in the chat, so I can ask a last one. You mentioned the Jewish community.
Yes.
Have these Sparta excavations produced any Jewish material culture of that period, like pottery or anything else?
No.
That's a question of complete ignorance.
Yes. From what I know, they were living within the Byzantine framework. They didn't have their workshops of pottery. There were skilled workers of silk clothes. And it was not, they were just removed from the Castron, from the Acropolis, outside the Acropolis, because they had those disturbing and unhealthy activities within the Castron. And Nikon wanted to change the city, and he did it. So there is, from what I know, and if I'm wrong, somebody should correct me, there is not a Jewish material culture in what concerns the pottery. Not that I know. No, they were living within the empire, and they were using the material culture of the empire in what concerns pottery.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
What would be interesting would be to find an excavation, a synagogue. That would be a nice finding in Sparta, which hasn't occurred yet.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Thank you
That
very
would
much.
be something. If they had an ecclesiastic building, that would be something very important for the history of the city.
Yes. So thank you very, very, very much for this very interesting talk. You have definitely thrown a lot of light on our knowledge of Byzantine Lacedaemon. And I would like to thank you on behalf of the Center, on behalf of the Center for Late Antique and Byzantine Studies, and also on behalf of the city of Sparta. Unfortunately, the mayor of Sparta, Mr. Petros Doukas, was engaged with the Spartan race events that's happening, like started today and will last for 3 days. So
I know. I live here. I know. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So thank you very much. And many congratulations for the great job that both you and our colleagues in the Eforate of Antiquities for Laconia are doing at very, very difficult times. We all acknowledge that. So thank you all very much for your hard work and for this excellent research that all of you are producing from prehistoric times to the Byzantine period and later. So on behalf
I wanted also to thank you. And it was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk a bit about the Byzantine phase of the history of this city.
Thank you. It's our honor as well. So thank you again. On behalf of the Center, I would also like to warmly thank Mayor Doukas and the City Council of Sparta for their collaboration on this project, the University of Nottingham and the marketing team of the School of Humanities, and also the Department of Classics and Archaeology at the university for their continuous support of the series. I would also like to thank Mr. Petros Kapernarakos and the Vachos Radio News for media sponsorship. It has made a big change in the reach of audience. Above all, I would like to thank all of you who have attended both on Teams and on the live stream, and we very much hope that you will be joining us again next week. That is Thursday, the 10th of November, again 5 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. Greek time. We will be welcoming Mr. Aris Saravopoulos from the Greek Ministry of Culture and Sports. Aris will talk to us about Kythera and Laconia, a continuous dependent relationship. Should I also mention, before we close the webinar, that if you are not yet a member of our center and you wish to become one, it's free. Do email us at csps@nottingham.ac.uk. Have a very nice evening. See you all next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.